Hello, all you Estrins and Putneys and Posters and Putneys and Estrins of the New World. It's Erev Shabbos Teitzei, and we have some interesting mitzvahs here in this week's parsha about taking care of poor people. So in chapter 24, verse 19 and 20 of the Teitzei, Parshas Devarim, Sefer Devarim. When you reap your harvest in your field, and you forget a bundle in the field, you shall not turn back to take it. It shall be for the proselyte, the orphan, and the widow, so that Hashem, your God, will bless you in all your work. The orphan and the widow didn't have a mommy and daddy or a husband to earn money for them, so they had to get their food some other way unless they came from a rich family, which most people don't, as you and I well know. And as far as a ger is somebody who didn't have any land. The land was divided among the 12 tribes, not the tribe of Levi. And if you came from another country and said, I want to be a Jew, fine, take on all the mitzvahs. What do I do for a living? Well, that's your problem. You've got to go get a job or something, but some of them were just poor, so the food would be left for them as well. So here we have a field, and you, in the course of gathering up your grain, you would make a bundle like that. You grab a bunch of stalks, and you have this curved side, and you cut it, and then you tie it with some of the stalks like that. We call that a sheaf in English. So if you leave one out in the field, you can't go back and take it. Two or more, yeah, it's a bundle. So this way, if there's one out there after the work is done at the end of the day, the poor people know that one I'm allowed to take. Two or more, not allowed to take. And when you, so that's called shichacha from shachachti. I forgot, I left it. There's also, as part of this, individual standing stalks of grain. If you have a few of these that you didn't reach when you cut, and you finish that section, you move on, and you see, oh, there's another stalk, you gotta leave that. Also, in the next pasuk it says, when you beat your olive tree, do not remove all the splendor, that is, all the olives, behind you. It shall be for the proselyte, the ger, the orphan, and the widow. And when you harvest your vineyard, grapes, you shall not glean behind you. It shall be for the proselyte, the orphan, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this thing. Why I was a slave in Egypt? Well, a couple of things. One is, you were poor back in Egypt. Another thing is, who gave you this land? It's not your land. God gave it to you. And he can take it away, which is what happened when we got kicked out into the diaspora. He took our land away. Now we're getting it back. Baruch Hashem. There's another mitzvah called peah. Peah means corner. You know the hair that some Haredi Jews have coming down like this? That's called peos. Peah. And those are from the corner of the beard. The Torah says you can't cut the corner of your beard. There's an argument where that is, but those who grow them long say, these are my corners, these are my peos. So in a field, you have to leave the corners. Actually, if you're starting in here, it would be at the end. You leave the corners. And the Torah doesn't say how much. So you could theoretically just leave one stalk, and according to the Torah, you're done. But the rabbi said it has to be at least 1 out of 60. So that if you have 1,000, then you're going to have to leave 60. If you have 600, you're going to have to leave 10. Okay. So it's not a huge amount, and there were people who were more generous would leave a bigger area. There's also one called leket. The Estrons know this term. And with leket, if you dropped 2 straws, 1 or 2 straws, you couldn't pick them back up. If when you're cutting, you drop them, 2 straws fall down, 1 straw, can't pick it back up. If it's 3 or more, you may. So again, the poor people come through and they say, oh, okay, there's 2 stalks right there. I'm allowed to take them, or 1 stalk. What else we have? Oh, there are other provisions for feeding the poor. In the 3rd and 6th year, there's something called Meiser Ani, where people would have to give from their harvest a certain amount to the poor, the ger, and the widow and the orphan, or whoever else is poor. And also, every time you harvest anything, you have to give a certain percentage to the Kohanim and a certain percentage to the Levium. So the Estrons would do well in this, because and also with challah. Every Friday afternoon, when everybody's baking the challah, they take off a piece of the challah and they run it up to Mrs. Cohen. And by the end of the afternoon, she got this huge amount of challah from everybody in the neighborhood, and that's what she would bake and make her bread. So all these things are commanded by Hashem to help the poor, to help the Kohanim and the Levium, whose job it is to teach Torah, not to be busy with work like everybody else. And this is a marvelous thing in ancient times. There were kings who would say, okay, we have to feed the poor. There are other kings who say, to heck with the poor. Let's let them starve. If we need them for some purpose, we'll feed them. If we don't, we'll let them starve. We could sell the land to somebody else. This is the law for every Jew. Every Jew who grows something has to take care of the poor. Of course, at the end of 7 years, we have Shvius, when nobody's allowed to plant or harvest. You just leave the land alone, and anybody could come into your farm and take whatever they want. It wasn't stealing. It was a mitzvah, because the land didn't really belong to the owner. Again, it belonged to Hashem. Everything we have belongs to Hashem. He provides us with what we need so that we can do His work, eat, sleep, have clothes. But everything that comes to us is from the hand of Hashem. In the story of Ruth, she goes out into Naomi goes out, and Ruth goes out into the field of Boaz, and he tells his workers, drop a lot of stuff, leave a big pay. So she comes home with a huge amount of grain, because he was a tzaddik, he was a generous man. He knew that this poor relative had nothing. So there are limits to how much you can give. You can't make yourself poor in order to help a poor person. But a big part of the agricultural life of the Jews in Israel, ancient Israel, was that they had to take care of the poor, think of them all the time. And if somebody fell on hard times, we had earlier in this parsha, that if your brother has gotten poor, you got to help him out. So that's it for now. Shabbat Shalom, and see you next time.